Hey guys, it's Eric Weingart with Weingart Racing. The first thing I want to say today is I don't port cast iron heads. I'm going to start the video with that way. I don't port cast iron heads, and if you watch this video, you'll understand why I'm saying it now instead of later, because I am going to talk about cast iron heads in this video. The second thing I'm going to say is Happy Thanksgiving. I hope you guys are all getting healthier and fatter at the same time. But there's a lot going to happen in this video. So I'm going to give you just some of the highlights, some of the things I'm going to talk about, but I put a whole bunch of stuff in this. For one, I'm going to talk about what happened with the big block Chevy supercharged engine on the dyno. And then, yep, here's a sexy beast. My 477 is actually like a 483 big block Chevy. Root supercharger, 1071, high helix steel. All set and ready to get some power until we go to turn on the dyno and you get this. No data to remote. So yeah, I was going to do a live feed, but the dyno decided it didn't want to operate. We put in some calls. I think it might be maybe the power supply either at the console or at the panel itself out there on the dyno. But whatever it is, it's stopping the dyno from turning on, so we can't really do anything with it. So once that's resolved, I'll be back there again to try dynoing and see how much power this thing makes. He's already started it up on the dyno, by the way, so it's working. That's what sucks. He started it up last Friday and got it warmed up, did the break-in cycle, all that, put a moderate amount of load on it, and then just shut it off because it's methanol. It's going to milk the oil. And he's like, we'll just wait till you get here and do all the tunings. All great. So dyno's work perfectly. I show up, doesn't work anymore. So that's what's going on with that. We're going to talk about some cast iron small block Chevy heads that are coming up for future testing, so you can see the new short block for that. We're going to talk about some updates on my son's Nova, maybe talk about how he's doing, and then I'm going to show you some different stuff around the shop, because right now it's a disaster. So it's I don't know if it's worth seeing, but I guess you get to see it. But it's got a lot of cool stuff in this. But there's also, this is the big one, I'm putting in a little bit of tech right here at the start. So here in a second I'm going to flip my screen and I'll show you some tech from the LS test. So I'm going to show you the results of which heads did the best of all 7 that were tested on that LS engine. So I've got a little chart and I can show you that. So yep, let me flip the camera and I'll show you that to start off with. Here is the dyno results, and this is the graph, and this is the reason why I don't often do these when you're comparing lots of different things. Several people said, man, it'd be easier to see if it was a graph. Does it? When you compare a lot of things, the lines get kind of blurry and in between. It's very hard to see on camera. But I'm only going to show you this sheet. I'm going to break this down further in later videos. And the reason why is because this sheet, if you have the link to the LS Cam Challenge, this sheet's already in there. But I sent this sheet with all the other 155 pages of dyno test to the printer to have the LS Cam book printed. It's going to be available. They said I could pick it up next Wednesday. So if you pre-ordered, great. If you have it and you're like, what LS book you talking about? For the entire 2024, all the LS tests that I've done, including the Cam Challenge, I made it to one book that's very thick, and it will be available. Like I ordered 10 extra, and I'm picking them up on Wednesday. But if you want to order them, in this video, there will be a link in the description where you can click and you can order the book. Because after the other 10, I'm not selling any more print ones because they are very, very expensive to print. Because for those that don't know, black and whites are cheaper than color. Obviously, this is color, and it's got like 40 pages of color. So, but anyway, if you want to see more about this, if you got the LS Cam link, you can zoom in and you can see things a lot clearer. So if you didn't donate to that, you still have an opportunity to. You can just go on my website and do that. But also it'll be available in print book. But let's just get to this. Now this is all the heads that were tested on this. And this is all with the same camshaft. I want to explain that first. Same camshaft, same intake, same carburetor, same headers. Because a lot of the cam tests, a lot of the tests I've done, I switched either intake or a different cam, so on and so forth. These are only difference is simply the heads. So understand that first. So what heads were tested? First off, we have the AFR LS3 Mongoose head. This is their more expensive CNC ported head. It had been milled down to 64 cc's, so it actually gave a compression ratio of 11.85. The next set right here, this is a set of ported 243 heads. So a customer brought these in. These are Cathedral. Now this ran on the Victor Junior too, but so did all the rest. But this one obviously is a Victor Junior for Cathedral ports. But this is a 243 set of heads I ported, and that was the other head tested. Then you've got this one's different from that one. This is the AFR LS3 Enforcer head. So this is their as cast head. It's the import head. And by the way, I should back up. The 243s, because they had a smaller chamber, had 11.7 compression. But back to these. So the AFR LS Enforcers, completely stock, they yielded 11.2 compression ratio. Then, this was the head that was used on the Cam Challenge. This was a ProMax LS3 large bore head. It gave a compression ratio of 11.45. Then, I tested a set of 823s LS3 head stock. Although I did do a valve job and surface them, just freshen them up. And they had 11.2 compression ratio. This one was a set of Brodix BR3 heads. I did some mild port work on them. They had the largest chamber and had the least compression ratio at 10.7. The last one tested was a ProMax small bore LS3 head. Now this one's got a very small chamber and it had a 12.94 compression ratio. So of all the rest, the highest compression ratio was a small bore LS3 from ProMax. The largest compression ratio was that one. The smallest compression ratio, or least, was the Brodix BR3. The rest are kind of in between. Now you're like, I like to see the flow numbers. Again, I have all that stuff, but it's at the printers right now, so I can't show you in this. This I just happen to print out. Here are the results. It looks a little confusing, doesn't it? But I'll go ahead and tell you. If we look over here, these are the horsepower numbers. So it'll give you an idea. So this green line right here, that's your small bore ProMax LS3 head. It's the winner. So all these were used with a Texas Speed Stage 2 camshaft, the 1 3/4 headers for a chassis, and 1000 CFM Demon carburetor, 4150 AFR 1-inch spacer. So as you could tell, ProMax small bore was the best. But if you also look, it had by far a point compression ratio over number 2, which happened to be the AFR LS3 Mongoose head. You can see these two are far above the rest. But again, that one's real high compression ratio. This is pretty close. After that, if you look here, it's the AFR LS3 Enforcer head. So that's as cast versus their CNC ported. Then you've got the ProMax large bore head. As you can tell, it didn't even do as good as the Enforcer head. And it definitely dips down. We'll look at the bottom here in a second. Then you got my Brodix BR3 head that I mildly ported. Now it's hanging with it, but in all fairness, it's a point of compression ratio down from everything from these. So it's a 1 point down from what the AFR is. And I mean, it's just down that way. And then right underneath it, you have the ported 243 heads. Now they've got 1 point more compression ratio, and you can see where it's at. And then way down here is the stock LS3 head, way down there. So that one I'll go ahead and give you a little asterisk. This is before we figured out we have to lock out the timing because it was trying to adjust by map. So that could have been higher, and someday we might revisit that. But only did like 598, and the rest were all above that. So if you look at the lower part of the graph, you can see all these are pretty close. You might say, what are these two? Well, if we look real close, I got to check and see. My vision's not always the best. For sure, the 823 has the least torque. And then you got that one, which I think looks like the ProMax large bore. Yeah. Yes, it is. Looking at the color. Yep. So the ProMax large bore, definitely not so good at the lower, but much better at the peak. So those are the low ones. Just make sure it's not this one. Brodix BR3, that's a light blue. Oh, okay, that doesn't make any sense. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the same time. It's gotta be that one. Yep, because that other dark blue for the Brodix is right there. But anyway, that kind of gives you an idea. I'm trying to figure out what this other one is real quick. I know that one's the LS3 stock one. That one looks like the large bore. Let's just double check. Yep. So that's a large bore ProMax. So that's the one we use on the Cam Challenge. I wish we would have used one of these. By the way, I did test several of the other camshafts. Like the top 3 camshafts were tested again with this AFR LS3 head. So they got tested on both these just to see if the order would have changed. But anyway, there's that. But let me show you some of the other stuff. Here's the new 383 short block. I got this from a viewer. A viewer said you can use this and test it indefinitely. Now, Smetting had built this short block. It's got a cast crank, but it's a weird thing. It's a 3.8 stroke, and then it's got hypertetic pistons. They're a dish, as you could tell, but it's a weird bore. It's 4.0015 bore size. So instead of your typical 383 where it's 4030 375 stroke, this is 4.0015 and a 3.8 stroke. But it's got a Speedmaster Pro Comp aftermarket block, which is should be fine for what we're doing here. We're gonna test a whole bunch of hydraulic rollers on this thing and a bunch of cast iron heads. The goal is to get this engine to perform very, very well, but more streetable than what the 406 Dyno mill had been, or even the 421 that we were testing as well. The only bad side about this block, as you could tell, is this. It looked like it had been sitting out and it got heavily rusted. I tried scraping that off, but it leaves a divot. So the whole thing has to be torn back down just to mill it off so we can get it a flat surface. We'll actually bring it close to 0 deck too. We'll leave it 5 in the hole. But yeah, that was the only downside for this. So it's got to be all torn down just to do that. But anyway. Remember, I do not port cast iron heads. I do for myself, not for others. And rarely for myself. So what you have here, these are all the heads that will be on that 383 short block I just showed you. This are several sets. So these are actually 492s. I've never actually seen a set in person, so that's cool. I'm gonna get to flow those. It looks like someone modified them though, unfortunately. What I am gonna do with those, I'm gonna stick some bigger valves in and do some port work with it. And then, because the goal for all this, in case you're wondering what all these cast iron heads are, because Tony even came over, he goes, "Why are you messing with this junk?" I say, well, you know, have you ever heard the LS3 guy or the LS guys that they're saying, you know, that the stock heads are garbage, small block Chevy can't make as much power, you know, that they're just garbage. And I don't entirely disagree with some of that, but I also know you guys haven't been around the small block enough to understand some of these heads have made as much or more power than what your cammed LS engine is making. So to kind of prove that or disprove it, maybe I could be wrong, but I don't think so. I'm going to dyno test it on a 383, and we're going to try to put a hydraulic roller in all these, you know, street compression ratio, exactly like you would have for your 6-liter, and try to make these make as much or more power than the LS engines. So what heads are we talking about? The 492s. Those are nice. They were a stock replacement head. Doing some work on those. These, I believe, are 882s. These are the open chamber ones. My goal is to get those to make as much or more power than those. So those are going to take a lot of milling to get the compression ratio down, but that's one. I believe these are 598s and these are 993s. I believe. I'm probably wrong saying that. Those are a set of 041s and they won't be used because, man, I'm going to show you that. The guide is so worn out on one that it just totally destroyed the seat. Like, you'd have to replace the seat, but still isn't right. So, point being, I'm going to take these heads, I'm going to make them as good as I possibly can. The ones I'm really going to focus on is these 882s for sure. I want to get as good as possible because I really would like to see them just dominate. And then also those 492s. I wish I had another set. I wish I had a set of 461 double humps. And maybe I'll go out and find them on Marketplace and get those and do it at the same time. Because we're going to put in the same type of camshaft we're putting in the LS engine, like the LS3. Like, I'm going to find me a Truck North camshaft. See if we can't, and like the Truck North camshaft for the LS3, see if I can't have one ground for the small block Chevy in the same type of pattern, run that, and boom. So, and you're like, well, that's cheating. You're doing poor work. Obviously, it's not the same. What I'm going to do is multiple stages. So obviously, I'll cut out to bigger valves. I'll even put 8mm stuff in because that's the same thing that the LSs have. And that's not really any modification. That's just rebuild and mill it down. And then I'll start doing pour work, and we'll see where we get. It might be way off. My goal is to get 500 with these heads, which is, I will say, you know, LS guys, you can beat me up all you want. I understand what you're saying. Remember, I've done a lot of LS testing. I will say this is probably not going to get there, but I'm going to give it hell trying just because I think it's fun to try to see it happen, because I think a lot of this stuff does get underplayed. So just to give you an idea, let me show you this. I wanted to show you this. You see this? These are old Pro Brockers, and that engine that it's sitting on, that's a 355 it was built in 1998. Gary Dunsworth built this and used it in Olson's race car. I saw this engine on his chassis dyno in Pro Stock trim, not the NHRA stuff. This is like circle track stuff. So we're talking like wide McCreary slicks, steel rims. They didn't have none of the nice stuff they had there. And this thing on alcohol made like 430 to the wheels. And that's a flat tappet camshaft in that thing, because that's the rules, had to have it. And nobody hardly ran hydraulic rollers or even saw rollers back then. So yeah, 430 stock heads, flat tappet camshaft. That's pretty impressive. But I also wanted to show you this. Have you ever wondered about how to take out studs on these stock heads? I had been using this Goodson tool to remove the studs from the heads forever, and it's been a disaster. So for Goodson, if you're ever listening to my video, I'm sure I'm not the only one, but your stud puller sucks, because what happens is you use it once and it will break. Maybe you might make it through one set of heads. Maybe I've actually had one break halfway through the second head, but that puller sucks. So I was asking Dunsworth, hey, how do you do it? And he said, well, we got this tool, and it just threads on here, and this is how we take them out. And so I'm going to show you the video of them taking out. Look how fast this is. So here's progress on Bishop's Nova, and man, it looks like a disaster because the shop looks like a disaster. Usually on Sundays, I'll come out here and clean everything up. But because of his swim meets, it's been happening because we're in the middle of swim season and it lasts a long time. I haven't had a lot of time. For instance, last weekend, we were in Lenexa, Kansas, which is like a suburb of Kansas City, for a swim meet. He did fantastic, and thank God. He'd been in a hole, so he finished long course season in the summer, dropped times, and you think everything was good, but to him, he didn't drop enough times, and he felt crushed. And then he kept going to each meet. Now we're in short course season. He's like not doing his personal best, and it's just eating him, and it's just in his head. And I know he's practicing harder, working out harder, and he's just making the same. He's not going as faster, he's going slower, and he was getting frustrated. Then on the next to Kansas, I don't know what happened. But he went in there and he did his best 50 free style swim ever, 24:03. His previous had been 25:20. And that's only because he kept, every time he would swim that event, he would mess up some way. Finally, a good one. And then in the 100 free, so that's a new PB. Then in the 100 free, he finally broke his best time ever. So I was like, great. His 500 time, he still was faster, and he's gone in almost a year. So he felt, it was a good meet. But on Sunday, since I wasn't here, the shop ends up being a disaster. Just don't pick up stuff. But his Nova, the rear end's here. So this is a 4.9-inch. Got the third member in, 355 gear. This is getting ready to get shoved into the car. I still have to work out the brake lines, so I'm going to build those first just because I'd rather do it here than underneath the car. Then I'm going to shove that in. Then it'll be actually able to roll, thank God. But that's in. This is kind of cool. See all the boxes of crap. That's a tank. That's a fuel tank from Aramoto. We've got the pump inside. I'm super pumped about that one. But, the interior, it's still what it is. But it's making progress. Not a whole lot. But, it's great. The other thing about him, since we're talking about him a little bit with his swimming, a couple weeks ago, I was actually gone to Arkadelphia, Arkansas, because he went there for a recruiting trip for swimming, and he verbally agreed to go there. So now I know where he's going to college, Henderson State in Arkansas, and he's going to be studying mechanical engineering, and he'll be swimming there. And they said they could make him faster. I felt real great about the coaches. He felt great about the whole thing. It felt great. And also the college isn't super expensive, so college is expensive no matter what you do, but it's cheaper actually than even an OSU here in Oklahoma or OU in Oklahoma. And they've got an engineering degree program, so it works out perfect for him. I'm excited for that. He's doing great. You might say, or is he helping you with the car? And in all fairness, no. And I feel bad. I would like for him to be out here doing it, but I also understand he swims like 30 hours a week. He's got 40, you could say like 30 hours of school a week. But some of those are college classes because he's doing concurrent enrollment, trying to get some of these college classes out of the way before he goes off to college. And those are a little bit harder, so I know he needs to study more and things like that. So the point is he doesn't have a lot of free time anyway. So the goal is to get it running so I can give it to him as a graduation gift to him. But anyway, that's it for that. One other thing, I want to show you this. Walking over here. These are a set of the Edelbrock Performer RPM heads. These will also be tested on that 3D3 just to show you. But I was initially going to use these on the engine we're going to blow up. So if you don't know about that, Gary does with the machine, he's building the engine we were going to intentionally blow up on the dyno. What it is a small block Chevy. We want to see what fails first. We're using the cheapest parts. He had a 4-bolt main block. I'd preferred it would have been 2-bolt main, but it's a 4-bolt main. The reason why it was junk is because the starters broke off. So unless it was a sprint car engine, you really couldn't use it for anything. But it's great because the starter, there's 2 starters on the dyno anyway, so that starts it up, so you don't really need a starter. So putting in a stock cast crank, he had some pistons and rods out of a 604 crate engine. We're going to reuse those. Those end up being forged pistons, but they're just GM rods, so they're just the factory ones, probably the better factory rods. But I was going to use this set of heads to blow it up, or if not, these sets, which I know you guys have seen these. These are probably the most common. Those are those, they look like the AFR Enforcers, but they're the cheaper version you can get somewhere else that have 11-30 seconds. I was going to use those, but I'm not going to. And the reason for that is I was like, well, screw it. The 406 my dyno mule, it has a set of AFR Enforcer heads that I already assembled and they're fine. I just ported the exhaust on that. So we're just going to use that head. And you're like, why would you destroy that? Here's the reason why. The AFR Enforcer heads on the small block Chevy side, they have now changed their design, at least from what I've been told. So the Enforcers that used to look like that are not the same anymore. Now they look like according to what I've heard, the AFR 195 heads, like their CNC ones. So that's what they're as cast versions of, almost like the Pro Max. But anyway, so they're not selling the Dart Enforcers or the AFR Enforcers like I have now. Those aren't, if you ordered them, you probably wouldn't get the same ones. At least I don't think you will. So since they're not making them anymore, might as well blow them up. So I've already got the shaft rockers for that. It's all set up. Daniel Powell supplied me a solid roller cam. He's like, I got this one just here. Yeah, it'll work fine for what you're going to do. Because I said, do you got anything that's you wouldn't really sell to a customer, but it'll get by? And he's like, I got something. And so I'm going to throw that in there, and we're going to do our best to make as much power as possible and see what fails first. If it'll be the crank, the rods, or the block. Hopefully the pistons stay in. I told Gary, you put it in like a ton of gap, like almost 60,000. I don't care. I don't want the piston rings to butt together. And we'll just make it happen. We'll see what it does. Let's see. I had to see if you guys could help me out on this deal. Here's what I mean. You get the chance to see the floor. This is a set of Ford turbo headers. And I've got a supercharger that I can run on that engine we're going to blow up. I've got that torque storm. But in my head, I was thinking, I bet the crank fails, but not the way you think. I'm thinking the front snout on the crank, because it's cast, stock factory cast crank, will probably break the keyway or the snout trying to turn the supercharger before we actually can make enough power before it breaks the engine. So I do have 2 turbos, and I know they'll make 1,500 horsepower easy, but I don't have small block Chevy turbo headers. If any of you out there in the world that are watching this video, thank you. If you have a set of those that you don't mind me borrowing to try blowing up an engine, I will pay for the return shipping both ways. I just want to, and I prefer a fairly decent one, so at least 1 3/4 inch. But you know, I don't want it to blow up because of something stupid I did wrong. And also needs, I think, a flange like that. I'm not a turbo guy, so I need to learn more about it. But I know I've got the turbos, and I think they're flanged like that. But if you got that, could you email me at winegunnerracing@gmail.com? And let's see. I think that's one more thing I want to show you is this. So this is an interesting story one. So Nick, Dominic, as you guys know, we've done some dyno tests together. We was with the Old Man's Garage, went up there and dynoed the 496 with my Trick Flow 280 heads. And he's now taken it other places and dynoed as well. But these are actually his Brodix IK 180 heads. And an interesting story about this is I had a customer that had bought one time a set of IK 180s. Actually, we had this whole conversation. I'll just briefly put it this way. Had a whole conversation, IK 180s, and what I sold him was I would do, and I redid the valve job, which this is done, and then I blended out the chambers and just right through here. So pretty much from 1 inch before and after, and that's it, was done. And I flowed them, and they're a really good head. And I said, that's a really good way to have the 180s. Anyway, he wasn't he wanted the 200s, which I told him won't be as good. And he ended up selling them and then getting a set of AFR and Forcer heads, just like I had mentioned, and ran those. So I was like, man, I want to do a test based on that. So what I've got here is Dominic has a 383, and I guess I do too, but well, you probably use his. And these IK 180s, and I'm gonna do the same thing I did to that customer's heads. I'm gonna valve job them like I already got the valve job done. I'm just gonna blend the chambers and then blend that just like I've done on his. I'm gonna dyno this, and Dominic also has a set of AFR and Forcers, and we're gonna dyno and comparison. Hydraulic roller, pretty basic thing, but that's another thing. I don't know where we're gonna do it at, by the way. So that's just a matter of time. Also coming up, which this will happen after the year, this is that small block Ford. The heads, I guess, are on the way, and I'll get to put this together and dyno on this. This is not the one used for Cam Challenge. That's still yet to be. GPI is, or Kuntz is supposed to send the 427 short block. I've got the heads, I think, coming, which I'll announce later. And I think I've got the intake coming too, so it should be pretty mean. But that's ways down the road. That'll come up after January. I'll talk more about it. Also, don't forget PRI is like 2 weeks away. We've got a room reserved in the conference room, room 204, on Friday the 13th between 11 and 1. So you can see all the Cam Challenge competitors. We'll be doing a little talking, and I'll introduce them, and they'll talk about how they got their camshaft stuff. It'll be a pretty neat deal. Also, PRI is awesome anyway. And I think that's where I want to wrap up the video, because I don't know what else I could tell you. But you guys have a happy Thanksgiving, and hopefully it gets through, except for this. You might say, what about the guy who won the camshaft giveaway? Because you said that was that. Yeah, here's what's cool. I will read those. So tomorrow, which is Friday, I'm going to read off some of the good deeds people did. And when I get to the person that won, I will let you know in that. So tomorrow, I'm just going to read those emails about the good deeds. It's pretty neat. And you might say, why don't you just tell us today? Well, simple. There's a guest that's fixing to come and arrive to my place for Thanksgiving. And she has no idea about any of this stuff, even though she knows I have a YouTube channel. She doesn't follow race car stuff or nothing. And there were 64 people that sent an email. And each time they did, I wrote down a number next to their name. You don't have to know your number. Just know that I did. And then when she comes in, I ask her to pick a number between 1 and 64. And she can pick 1 or 64. I'll tell her that way. And whoever she picks, you will win the camshaft. And I will announce that tomorrow. You guys, remember, I don't pour cast iron heads. You guys take care.